Have you ever witnessed a collapse of certainty? A moment when the ground shifts beneath someone who believed they held all the power. A seismic psychological event triggered not by a shout or a confrontation, but by the profound, unnerving absence of sound. The absolute, unyielding power of your silence. A silence that didn't just end a conversation, but terminated an entire reality. She had constructed around your presence and your predictable reaction. Because the question that burns through the aftermath is not about love lost or regret, but a far more primal, self-centered inquiry. Why did letting go of you hit her ego so hard, shattering her carefully curated self-image with the force of 1,000 unsaid words? And the answer lies deep within the intricate, often fragile architecture of the human ego, that psychological construct designed to protect the self, to maintain a sense of identity, superiority, and control, which in the context of a relationship often feeds on the constant, reliable stream of validation, attention, and emotional energy supplied by the partner, a partner whose role, in her subconscious narrative, was less that of an equal and more that of a necessary supporting character, a reliable mirror reflecting back the image she desperately needed to see of herself as desirable, indispensable, and ultimately the one in control. So when you made the conscious, deliberate choice to step away, not with a dramatic exit, but with a quiet, resolute withdrawal, you didn't just end the relationship. You instantly and irrevocably cut off the ego's primary source of sustenance, plunging it into a state of psychological famine that it was never prepared to endure, a shock that registers not as heartbreak but as a profound, existential threat to her very sense of self-importance, a sudden, terrifying realization that the source of her perceived power was not internal, but external, and now that external source has chosen to self-terminate its function, leaving her exposed and vulnerable in a way that true emotional pain rarely achieves. Because true emotional pain is about loss of connection, but the bruised ego is about the loss of status, the loss of control, and the terrifying loss of the predictable script. A script where she was always the protagonist, and you were destined to return, to chase, to beg, to validate her worth through your desperation. A script that your silence has now shredded into meaningless confetti. And this is where the suspense truly begins. In the vacuum created by your non-reaction, a void that her ego rushes to fill with frantic, often irrational attempts to reestablish the old dynamic, to provoke a response, any response. Because a negative reaction, even anger or accusation, would still be a form of validation, a confirmation that she still holds the power to move you, to disrupt your peace, to occupy the central stage of your emotional life. But your sustained, disciplined silence, your silence is not passive. It is an active, powerful statement of self-respect, a boundary drawn in the sand that says, my peace is more valuable than your drama. And this realization is the final, crushing blow to the ego, the moment it understands that the game is over, not because it lost a round, but because the opponent has left the arena entirely, choosing a higher ground where the rules of her game no longer apply. And this is why the impact is so devastatingly hard, because you didn't just leave her. You invalidated the very mechanism she used to define her worth, forcing her to look inward into the void where your validation used to be, a terrifying confrontation with the self that is the true source of her pain, a pain that is not the gentle ache of a broken heart, but the violent, disorienting shock of a shattered mirror, reflecting back a fragmented, uncertain image she no longer recognizes. And as you continue to rise beyond, maintaining that dignified, unwavering silence, you are not being cruel. You are providing the most profound, albeit painful, lesson in self-sufficiency, demonstrating through your actions that true power resides, not in the ability to control others, but in the unshakable strength to control your own destiny, your own peace, and your own reaction, a lesson that will echo in the chambers of her ego, long after the memory of the relationship is faded, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever do is simply walk away and say nothing at all, allowing the sheer weight of your absence to deliver the final, undeniable truth about who truly held the power all along, which was always you, the one who chose to let go, and in that choice found the ultimate, unassailable freedom, a freedom that she, trapped in the cage of her own ego, can only watch from a distance, realizing with a chilling clarity that the silence she hears is not just the end of your story together, but the deafening sound of her own carefully constructed world falling apart, a world that could not survive the loss of its most loyal, yet ultimately dispensable, admirer, and the only thing left is the stark, cold reality of her own reflection, unvalidated and alone, a powerful, necessary reckoning that begins and ends with the quiet, unyielding strength of your departure, A departure that proved beyond any doubt that your value was never dependent on her recognition, but was always, and will always be, inherent. A truth that hits her ego with the force of a psychological supernova, leaving behind only the dust of her former certainty, a dust that settles slowly, finally. In the quiet aftermath of your final beautiful silence, a silence that speaks volumes about your inner transformation, a silence that communicates a self-worth, so robust it requires no external affirmation, a silence that is the sound of a man who has mastered the art of emotional detachment, understanding that the greatest revenge is not a fiery outburst but a life well lived, a life unburdened by the need for her approval or her presence. And this is the core of the ego's devastation. The realization that the person she discarded, the person she took for granted, has not only survived but thrived in her absence. A thriving that serves as a constant, nonverbal refutation of her perceived superiority, a living, breathing testament to the fact that her role in your life was ultimately replaceable, a concept utterly anathema to the narcissistic tendencies of a wounded ego, which demands to be seen as the irreplaceable center of the universe. Yet your continued forward momentum, your refusal to look back, your commitment to your own path, acts as a continuous, subtle, yet profoundly effective psychological pressure, a pressure that forces the ego